Here's a maxim of law. Maxim of law out of Black's Law 4th, page 1420. It says a bunch of Latin words, and what those mean, it says, what the people have last enacted, let that be the established law. That's a law of the 12 tables, the principle which is still recognized. So it's a principle which is still recognized. Now, when the people of Illinois, and specifically Kendall County, last established was counties and townships with the county under the township form. They were continued from the 1870 Constitution, and that instrument is still alive and well, at least in part. Counties and townships can only change form by a referendum. The last will of the people is the 1970 Constitution. It clearly says that. So we don't even have to get into the 1870 Constitution stuff. We can just look at the 1970. They clearly have to change only by referendum. These are the established laws of the land. This is what our Constitution says. So now we're going to go and look at the current statutes of Illinois. But before we do, I want to remind you of some things and explain. Statutes are not the law of the land. They're legislation, they're rules. But these legislation and rules must be in pursuance to the Constitution. We really don't need to read them to prove anything. But this is a great teaching moment to show how the people that write these, which it's the attorneys that actually write these, they obfuscate and circumvent the Constitution by our ignorance of fundamental principles. Fundamental principles are the maxims of law and common law, which they're derivatives from the Bible and the constitutions. Those are things expressed in our constitutions. Whenever getting into a legal argument as one of the people, we don't want to use statutes. We want to use maxims and constitutions, because otherwise we get into all of this legalese and it gets confusing. And it's done that way on purpose. That's even a biblical principle. If you think back to the Tower of Babel in the Old Testament, it says the people were of one language and they were building something. Now, they were building something that was so great that God wanted to come down. It was not for his purposes. It was not for his kingdom. It was not for his glory. So he came down and he mixed up their language. What do we see today? We see that same principle. It's like the enemies of darkness came and understand that how do you not build something great? Well, you mix up the language. So they've mixed up our language with all of this legalese jargon. But the plain English of our constitutions are the law of the land. And you see this principle reversed then in the New Testament in the book of Ephesians, where we're supposed to be one body, one voice, one spirit. So when the people of Illinois, specifically the people of God, will hearken to his law, his order, his principles, we begin to speak with one voice to get back to exactly what is on this slide. What the people last enacted, let that be the established law. The principle is still recognized. So we don't want to use our statutes to try and make arguments concerning these things, because you get caught into all kinds of technicalities, because they intentionally write things to confuse you, to then make you think that something isn't true that is. So if we go right to this is straight off of the Illinois website that has our current statutes on there. And if you go to section 55 of the county's code, Article 2, Division 2-1, 2-3, 2-4, 2-5, it tells us everything we need to know. It's the governing bodies of counties. In Division 2-1, it specifically lists county under township organization. Now, have you ever heard that before? Have you ever heard of it? I never had. I didn't even know that existed. In 2-3, it has the reapportionment for county of county for election of county board. And then in 2-4, it has counties not under township organization, organized as a commission form of government. And then it has county executive form of government. Now, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on those two because the focus of this video is county under township form, of which a large majority of the Illinois counties are supposed to be lawfully. So in section 2-1, it tells us very clearly, the heading of it is counties under township organization. We don't even have to read the rest of this. I just want to point out that there are, in fact, in our Illinois statutes even, still supposed to be counties under township organization. Why wouldn't this statute be removed if they no longer existed? It's because they can't lawfully remove it. And they know that. They know exactly what they're doing. This is one of the only opinions I will offer in this whole video. This is a known thing that's been kept quietly in the background that attorneys know, and ultimately it's an evil kingdom of darkness thing that is trying to destroy this nation by centralizing everything. We'll probably get into that later on in this video, but it very much mirrors the time when Jesus walked the earth. The centralization of government creates tyranny. The fragmentation and decentralization of government creates liberty. And that's ultimately what we're after. We're after getting back to our fundamental principles and following what our constitutions say. So clearly, there is still counties under township organization. Now, if you read section 2-1004, this statute fulfills the constitutional obligation of the General Assembly to, quote, provide for a method of a county board. This is how it's supposed to be done in Kendall County and other counties with this form, which is most of the state. It says the certificate of election, the supervisors, notice how it says supervisors here, shall severally lay before the board at the first meeting after the election their several certificates of election, which shall be examined by the board, and if found regular, shall be filed in the office of the county clerk. This is literally how our county board is supposed to be formed. The supervisors from each township get together after the election. They all show that they were the winners of the election, and we have 9 board of supervisors. That's critically important because their power flow comes directly from the townships, and the people then are directly involved in the local government. Another key thing to understand is that means that Kendall County is not under the General Assembly. It's under the townships. And the townships are actually the most powerful form of government and the most direct access for the people to assert their power. Now we're going to get into the reapportionment for the county board. So this is division 2-3 of that same county code. The reapportionment for county board the reapportionment of county for election of county board. And it gives the definitions. Definitions as used in this division unless the context otherwise requires. There's your legalese term. And it says districts means a county board district established as provided in this division. And then it says county apportionment commission or commission means the county clerk, the state's attorney, the attorney general, or his designated representative, and the chairman of the county central committee of the first leading political party and the second leading political party. Now, first of all, this speaks of districts, which a county under township does not have, nor do they have the authority to mandate. And then note that clause at the top that says, unless the context otherwise requires. See, this is where they bank on people's ignorance, and it worked. This is the scapegoat sentence used by attorneys and by, legislators that want to centralize power. It says, unless the context otherwise requires. Why would they put that in there if it didn't apply to every single county? Why would you have to put that in there? It's because a county under township, there is no legislative authority for them to do this, but they bank on people's ignorance. And then the second part, in part B here, this gives, they're introducing political parties, and this is how they get the political parties, their hooks into the counties. Because the county central committees, they're political parties. They're not part of the Constitution. They're not part of our county elected officials. They're a separate thing. They're foreign to the Constitution. And this is where it's getting the county central committees involved. This is how politics gets into, and political parties get into the local government, which are literally against the Constitution. And as I said at the beginning of this video, the political party system is something that is used to get the House divided, the people divided into these political banters rather than looking at the fundamental principles of law. That's how they steal power from us, and that's how they use power that they were never granted. So this is why you see an ongoing tradition of, usually in township, the township elected officers, they're normally independent on the ballots. They don't usually go for Republican or Democrat parties. That doesn't mean they can't, because that's part of the system that we currently have, but most of them follow this tradition of being independent. Political parties don't matter. And again, I'll say it just to keep explaining it over and over again, because repetition gets this stuff into our minds to understand that it is my current belief, and that we do not have to even care whether they're Democrat or Republican. What we have to know is how the people hold each servant accountable, because that's exactly what they are. They're servants. They're trustees and servants of the people. So it doesn't matter if they're a Republican or a Democrat. They have to follow the Constitution, but they don't. Both sides don't. That's my point, is they keep us arguing about Democrat and Republican rather than the people coming together united, speaking one voice, which is our Constitution. And if we would do that, the political gamesmanship would, the party gamesmanship would take a back seat. And I'll throw this in here right now just in case I forget later. A lot of people might be asking, well, yeah, but we don't want that because maybe I live in a liberal place and I don't want liberal policies. I don't like this idea. If you're a Bible-believing conservative person and you understand the fundamental principles of law, you have nothing to worry about, because anything that the liberal agenda wants to accomplish is literally unlawful. They're trying to do things by a democracy, by forcing their will upon people. They don't observe the Bill of Rights in our state constitutions and our federal constitution. So we don't have to be afraid that they might try to push something that's liberal, because I can guarantee you it will be unconstitutional on its face. But you have to know how to make the correct argument. And that is seen in the current homeschool bill that they're pushing in Illinois, which there are other videos that we've done out there on that, and we did a notice for it. Quite literally, they're trying to invade your private home and private property. They can't do that per the Constitution. So no matter what they come up with for a statute, it's going to be unconstitutional in its application if they try to invade your home without following the due course of law and due process of law. But you have to know these fundamental principles. So I know I got on a sidetrack there, but these things are important because our liberty's at stake, our family, our posterity, our children are at stake. If we won't take action to learn these things and then take proper action lawfully and peacefully to get things back in order at a local level. Where was I? Part D down there. It says member or board member means a person elected to serve at the county board. Notice that it doesn't say supervisors anywhere in this. But see, in the previous one that we looked at, it talked about the supervisors laying their certificates before the board. So they hide the truth by not saying supervisor and then bank on the people's ignorance of law to get local government servants to do something they don't have to do. This is how they make a statute that is constitutional, but then confuse the people. An honest legislature would put a definitive qualifying statement at the beginning of this expressly saying, this does not apply to the county's under township organization with a board of supervisors. Then they get the people to think that they need attorneys who are never taught the fundamental principles of law or maxims to begin to argue statutes rather than simply standing on the Constitution. Now we're in section 23002. Here's where it gets fun. It says counties with population of less than 3 million and with township form of government. Now, why doesn't it say under township form of government? It's because by changing one little word, they can get their hooks in and confuse people. And then it says Part A, reapportionment required by July 1st, 1971. And each 10 years thereafter, the county board in each county having a population of less than 3 million inhabitants and the township form of government shall reapportion its county. Blah, blah, blah. And then going down, the county board shall also determine whether board members shall be elected at large from the county or by county board districts. Full stop, pause here. What happened to the requirement for a referendum to change the mode and method of how the county board's elected? How can they require this without a referendum? It can't be done. That's the simple answer. It can't be done. But also, remember what I said before. This says by July 1st, 1971. Now that's the first hint and clue that this was before July 1st of 1971 that this was written. It had to have been factually. But also, if you look up at the very top of this where it says from chapter 34, that's the old Illinois statutes. You see, what they did at this time during this time period of 1970 is they also reorganized and recompiled the Illinois statutes and renumbered and renamed everything, changed it all up. So it gets really confusing. And this is done, I believe, intentionally because they wanted to try to hide what they were doing. But this fundamentally changed unconstitutionally our state. It fundamentally changed it. So they can't change this without a referendum, yet they say it's required. But if the county board supervisors, if the board of supervisors at that time didn't understand the fundamental principles of law, they didn't know. They just read that and say, yeah. Before you read any statute, you need to read the Constitution and say, do they even have power to do this thing? And if they would have known what the Constitution says, then they would have known to say, this doesn't apply to us. It can't apply to us. Going down to Part B. Let me check my notes quick and make sure that I covered everything there. Just to remind us that a change in form of government requires a vote by the people. It's necessary. Anything other than that is void. And this part is twofold unlawful because it was written before July 1st, 1971, which is when the Illinois 1970 Constitution was enacted. And so that General Assembly still fell under the 1870 Constitution. So that's twofold because they wrote a statute they weren't supposed to be able to write. And secondly, they did it without a referendum. Now, in Part B here, it's interesting because they vaguely acknowledge that there could be advisory referenda. It says the voters of a county may, that's different from shall, advise the county board through an advisory referendum on questions concerning the number of members of county board to be elected and whether the board of members should be elected from single member districts and so on and so forth. The advisory referendum may be initiated either by petition or by ordinance of the county board. And then down at the bottom, an advisory referendum initiated under this section shall be placed on the ballot at the general election designated in the petition or ordinance. But our Constitution says that it must be by referendum. So they throw this in here to give it some semblance of hearkening to the Constitution, but it doesn't. It's not according to the strict text of the Constitution. It is clearly something that they can't do. Legislation is an act. This is clearly an unconstitutional act, first because it was dated and created because of when it was created, according to the 1870 Constitution, and secondly, because it requires a change in the form of government without the people's approval. So we're going to cover some more maxims here because we've always got to go back to what is written to understand what is true and what is not. Because otherwise you won't believe your lying eyes. You won't believe that this even could take place. But again, this is not my opinion. This is not our opinion. This is factually what is written. Now there's a few maxims to go over here. One of them says, he who does contrary to the law, who does what the law prohibits, he acts in fraud of the law, who the letter of the law being inviolate, uses the law contrary to its intention. So if you act contrary to the law or do what the law prohibits, it's fraud. What the General Assembly did to cause that requirement in 1971 was fraud. And there is no statute of limitations on fraud. There is no statute of limitations on a constitutional trespass. Time does not make this okay. The passage of time does not make this okay. It says, where there is no authority to establish, there is no necessity to obey. Did the General Assembly have authority to establish a statute that went directly against the constitutions? No. So there was no necessity for the County Board of Supervisors to obey that. Another one says gross negligence is equivalent to fraud. I would say that was gross negligence. It was clearly unconstitutional, and it's equivalent to fraud. And then the last one, constitutions and laws precede the judiciary. You see, you have to understand that the judiciary or judges, their job is to declare the law, and they have to do it according to the fundamental principles and the constitutions. So the constitutions and laws precede, those come before. If there is no constitution, there's nothing for a judge to declare. If there is no laws, there's nothing for a judge to declare. Now, they could still use the fundamental principles, the maxims of law, but all of these things have to be melded together and in pursuance of one another. And you have to follow the chain and the flow of how this goes, and building one line upon one line, precept upon precept, principle upon principle, so you don't get off course. But that's where we just read the statute without reading and understanding the Constitution, and we get off course. Now, the current Kendall County Board and those dating back to 1971 are void. They're acting in fraud. It's gross negligence, fraudulent, and maladministration for them to ignore this. Now, again, like I've said, they've been sent notices and affidavits explaining all this, but they continue to ignore because they're listening to attorneys who don't know the fundamental principles or maxims. They look at these wordsmithed statutes and ignore our constitutions. So my point is, even if you're a Republican and a conservative, how can you complain about the Democrats, how bad the Democrats are, if you won't follow the Constitution yourself? That's the hypocrisy. And it's no different than when Jesus spoke to the scribes and the Pharisees in Matthew 23. He called them blind guides and omitting the weightier matters of the law and judgment, full of excess and extortion, outwardly appearing righteous, but full of hypocrisy and iniquity. That's what we have. If we're not going to start on the rock solid base of the Constitution, but we're going to start at, letter C and D and E, then we're going to get off course. And that's where these attorneys come in and they block and they obfuscate because, number one, they don't know. There might be some well-meaning ones out there, but they're arguing things incorrectly because they're not basing them off the fundamental principles and maxims in our Constitution. They get into the statutory arguments. And I'll tell you this, as the people begin to understand these things and know these things, the attorneys aren't going to be happy because it's going to begin to take away from a lot of the way that they make money. They make money off of controversy. They make money by having these court cases and they both argue back and forth. Well, guess what? They both still get paid at the end. But when the people stand up, when the people lawfully and peacefully use proper law and form by using notices and affidavits, we don't need attorneys to fix this. The people are the masters of error. The people are the ones that need to take action to fix this thing. If you took your car to a mechanic and that mechanic was supposed to know what he's doing and he botches the whole thing up and he can't fix it, he messes up, not just a mistake, like he literally is ignorant of what it means to be a mechanic and how something works. Can you leave your car at that mechanic or will you take it back to him? No, you can't. You have to find somebody who knows what to do about it. If our current legislators, our current county boards, our current public officers don't know what the Constitution says, we can't entrust them to abide by it. Now, attorneys are the ones that write all of these statutes. So attorneys are the ones that are blocking the access of the people from coming in and making things correct. There's a bigger thing there that we could be talking about, but we have to understand that we have a duty and obligation to recur to the fundamental principles. That's one of the primary duties we have as Americans, as the people, as God's people, is to understand and know what to do and how to fix things and put things back into order. Going on here, we're just going to look at the headings of these two, a couple of these things in the statutes. And notice in Division 2-4, remember, these are not the Constitution, these are statutes. And it even goes on to explain, it says counties not under township organization organized as a commission form of government. So there are counties that are under township organization and there are counties that are not, which are called commission form. And then it goes on in section 2-5 4006 in Part A, it says in every county not under township organization that is organized as a commission form of government having 3 commissioners elected at large, as described in subsection B or C. So we're not going to go into those right now because we're focused on the counties under township form, which is the majority of Illinois counties. You know, there's the big push to separate Illinois, make a new state. We don't have to do that. We can just take action in our local communities and restore township by township, county by county, until this state begins to be restored. And the counties that have a commission form or an executive form, what do they have the right to do? They have the right to alter, reform, or abolish because they're the people. So when they see these counties, like say Kendall, getting back into proper form, they're going to see that, wow, the people can do that. And then they can lawfully change their form of government to replicate that if they want to. What better of a way to do it? It's almost an impossible task to try and separate Illinois into a new state. That's a very, very difficult thing to do. But you only need a few people in each county to make sure that we recur to the fundamental principles and get things back into order. So here it shows that there are counties not under township form. What does that mean? That means that, again, there are counties that are under township form. Now, why would this be stolen from the people, and why is this such a big deal? It's because they're trying to hide and steal the power from the people and centralize government, pushing all the power back to the state general assembly. And this is what has led to tyranny and has given us King Pritzker. But what if we start to look at some of the township statutes? Now, I don't want to get into, we don't want to rely on the statutes for townships because, to be honest, I don't know if that's going to be a subject where we can broach in this video, but we have to understand, does the state even have the ability to write statutes for townships? That's a good question. But even still, I want to show you what is taking place, what takes place in some of the statutes that do exist. Now remember, in a Republican form of government, the people can wield their sovereignty either directly or through representatives. And remember that the 10th Amendment says that any power not given to the feds or given to the state is reserved to the people. Remember that. In the Article 30 of the section, it's 60 ILCS, is the Township Code, and it talks about annual meetings. Did you know that there's annual township meetings in respective townships for the transaction of the business of the township every year? And they're held on the second Tuesday of April each year. Now in these, if you look on the other side here, it says the powers of electors at annual township meetings. Now, what the electors are the people. And in a township meeting, the people come together annually and hold a meeting. Your elected representatives, the township trustees, the township supervisor, they're not the presiding people over this meeting. The people come together in a lawful meeting, and once they get there, they elect a moderator. And then that moderator is one of the people who runs the meeting. And the people can do things. And it says specifically in section 30-25, the exercise of corporate powers, the electors may take all necessary measures and give it directions for the executives for the exercise of their corporate powers. Now, there's a maxim of law, and this is reflected in basically all of the state constitutions very clearly, except for the Illinois one. And it says all political power is inherent in the people by the decree of God, except thus, let me try again. All political power is inherent in the people by decree of God. Thus, none can exist except it be derived from them. The American people are sovereign. All political power comes from the people. What we really are supposed to have in Illinois and specifically in Kendall County is a bottom-up form where the people assemble at their township. Then the township has it's autonomous, it has independence, it has freedom, it has liberty. And then the township supervisors assemble at the county board. Those supervisors are directly amenable to the people in their township. And then the county itself is under township, which means it's disconnected from the state, except where we've granted specific power in the Constitution. Now, our Constitution gets very, very confusing. So you have to understand the difference in these local forms of government and what they're supposed to look like in order to understand it. But notice here it says that the electors may take all necessary measures and give directions for the exercise of their corporate powers. This is annually something that happens. Now we're going to show some maxims about some things concerning necessity and the right to instruct. There's some maxims in law. One says all law has either been derived from the consent of the people, established by necessity, confirmed by custom, or of divine providence. What is divine providence? That's God's word. What is necessary is lawful. Thus, necessity knows no law. Necessity overrules the law. Necessity shall be a good excuse in our law and in every other law. The rights of necessity are a part of the law. You see, when the people assemble lawfully, they can, by necessity, do what needs to be done. This is a lawful, peaceful thing. But the people, if the people don't understand this stuff, we don't know that we can do it. But all power comes from the people, and the township is the place where you can assert your power directly. Now we're going to talk about the right to instruct. Because in the current Illinois Constitution, it says in Section 24 of Article 1, the enumeration of this Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the individual citizens of the state. So what is that saying? That's saying that, yeah, we've enumerated some of these rights, but that doesn't mean we don't have other rights. We have so many more rights that we even know about. One of them is the right of necessity. But we have so many rights we don't even know about. There's too many. The Constitution would be so long if we listed them all. So we put in this clause that says, yeah, we listed out some certain ones, but don't think that that you can deny or disparage other ones that we've retained. And this is borne out in the Illinois 1848 Constitution. And it says that the people have the right to assemble together in a peaceable manner, to consult for their common good, to instruct their representatives, and to apply to the General Assembly for redress of grievances. So the people have the right to instruct their representatives. Well, what does that mean? Well, first of all, there's a maxim of law that says rights never die. So if you read at the top of this one, it says if a person neglect to insist on his right, he is deemed to have abandoned it. That doesn't mean you lose it. That means if you don't use it, you lose it. It's called acquiescence. We've been being quiet. We haven't understood. We've become disconnected from our local form of government where we've lost our ability, we've lost our voice, our ability to speak. But our rights never die, and they're enumerated in many cases. Now, what does instruct mean from the Webster's 1828? So don't think on the other side of the screen there that Section 24 of the current Illinois Constitution specifically says that not all of our rights are enumerated. But yet in 1848, the people had enumerated their right to instruct. Did we lose that right because we didn't enumerate it? No, it was hidden. It was hidden because they came in and they rewrote the Constitution using attorneys. Yes, I know the people approved it. Okay, fine. We'll work with that. But they couldn't get rid of the fundamental principles. And it's really important to understand this one, that we have a right to instruct. The Webster's 1828 dictionary says that instruct means to direct or command, to furnish with orders, to inform, to advise, or give notice to. You see, when we're writing a notice to our government, it's a command, it's a direction from the king. Now, you can't just make up stuff to send them a notice about just because that's what it, fits your fancy and that's what you want. But when you're writing them to obey the Constitution, when you're showing them where the Constitution has been violated, they have a duty and obligation to redress those grievances. They have a duty to take up that command as if it is the dictate of a king. The people in America are kings. It's called a popular sovereignty. We saw a republican form of government, which we're guaranteed. The people are sovereign. Don't be afraid of that. Embrace that. That's what it's going to take to get our state restored and back on track. But we have to recur to these fundamental principles. So when we write a notice, we're giving instruction, we're commanding, we're furnishing with orders. And that's also protecting our servants, because our public servants, when they follow the Constitution, they have immunity. So they shouldn't be afraid to follow the Constitution. Matter of fact, they should be very afraid if they don't follow the Constitution, because then they don't have immunity. So we're going to look at some other states. Here's Virginia. Now remember, Illinois came from Virginia originally. And in the Declaration of Rights, in the preamble, it says a declaration of rights made by the good people of Virginia in the exercise of their sovereign powers, which rights do pertain to them and their posterity as a basis and foundation of government. Now, I know this is Virginia's constitution, but the principles still apply to Illinois because we're a state with equal footing as the original 13. What does Section 2 say? It says that all power is vested in and consequently derived from the people, that magistrates are their trustees and servants and at all times amenable to them. See, that's the thing that we've lost in America. We've lost the idea that the people are sovereign. We don't understand that we don't elect leaders. We elect servants who are our trustees. Our constitutions are trust indentures. They're trust agreements. These people swear an oath to them that they're going to follow them. They're trustees. And trustees get directed by the master, by the document, by the instrument, which is our Constitution. Anytime they step outside of that, they're acting on their own and not with immunity. Now, there's very difficult things that you can do, by filing court cases and stuff, but how much more simpler does it get for the people to assemble at their lawful township meeting and direct what gets done? Out of Alabama, it says that the people are the source of power, that all political power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority. Now, wait a minute. It doesn't say Alabama government. It says all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their benefit, and that therefore they have at all times an inalienable and indefeasible right to change their form of government in such a manner as they may deem expedient. So we have a right to change our form of government. But does government have a right to change itself? The answer is no. Illinois did not have a right, Kendall County did not have a right to change the form of government, which makes it void on its face, and we need to revert back to our Board of Supervisors. This shouldn't take and doesn't take a lawsuit. The county boards at each county, when they're made aware of these things, they have a duty and obligation to make sure that they get back to what the people last enacted. So now we're going to jump back to the Illinois statutes on townships, because there's a thing called a township meeting and a special township meeting. And a special township meeting is a meeting that shall be held when the township board or at least 15 of the voters of the township file in the office of the township clerk a written statement that a special meeting is necessary for the interests of the township. So wait a minute. The people can call for a meeting whenever they want. You get 15 people like-minded that want to recur to the fundamental principles, and you can do that? Well, what does that mean? Well, let's look down a little bit further. In this same section, it tells you the exercise of annual meeting powers. When a special meeting is called by the township board in the manner provided by this article, which means that the people can call for it. In other words, we get together and we instruct them to call a special meeting. So when that happens, the electors may take any action authorized by Article 30 that could have been taken at the annual township meeting. Now, just a minute here. This is to show you what we have available to us, what we have accessible by us, things that we kept for ourselves. But I have a question for you. Was the General Assembly ever granted the authority to limit the people to Article 30 of the statutes? The answer is no. We can do what is necessary. So we're not limited by statute because we have written our Constitution and we have formed our townships in a way for them to be separate and independent. And only where we granted authority to the state to do things do they get to do it. That's going to take another video to go into more details about that, but we're going to get into a little bit here. We're going to show you where it hints back to this. But the main primary focus of this video is to show people what a county under township means and the ability for us to call for special meetings to get things back into order, because the people have all the power. Now we're going to look at the 1970 Illinois Constitution, Article 7, Section 2. This is in local government. And I want you to see something here. In Part A, it says, the General Assembly shall provide by law for the formation, consolidation, merger, division, and dissolution of counties, and for the transfer of territory between counties. See here how the General Assembly provides for the formation of a county? Nothing's changed since the original 1818 Constitution regarding a county with a commission form. But if you first understand that a county under township form is different, then you begin to see this. When Kendall County took on county under township form in 1849, it dispensed with the General Assembly controlled county commissioners and formed a board of supervisors. This is critical to understand. Effectively, Kendall County is not under the state, but is under the townships, which are also not under the state, except where we expressly instruct them via the Constitution. See how there's no constitutional mandate here for a referendum? Because if the state General Assembly wanted to dissolve a county, they could without the people's permission. If things wouldn't have gotten messed up in Kendall County, this would become a net zero because the county is under townships. So you have to ask yourself a logical question here. Why would the state General Assembly be able to dissolve a county without a referendum, but can't dissolve a township without a referendum? It's because the county is a statutory creation of the General Assembly. It's their baby. But the township is the people's baby. It's created by the people. Don't confuse this that counties aren't ultimately still from the people, but understand how it relates to granted powers and how easily the people assert those powers. It's no wonder the state has hidden this from the people and why they're trying to do a final death blow by getting rid of townships. Now, if you look here in section B and C here of this, these both need referendums. County boundaries are not to be changed unless approved by referendum in each county affected. And county seats shall not be changed unless approved by 3/5 of those voting in the on the question in a county-wide referendum. This deals with counties, with boundaries and county seats, but not for the formation or dissolution of a county. You have to understand how a county under township works. The county is only there for administrating the collective business of the townships together, not asserting power over the townships. In section 3 of the same article, this says, a county board shall be elected in each county. Now, we've already gone over this once, but I'm hoping that you're going to see it with a different lens. A county board shall be elected in each county. The members of the county board shall be fixed by ordinance in each county within limitations provided by law. This just means that each county shall have an elected board. A county under township does. It's called a board of supervisors. And it's fixed in Kendall County to 9 because there are 9 townships in Kendall County. They are, in fact, elected. The second sentence here means the ordinance, not statutes, dictate the quantity of county board seats. The General Assembly does not and cannot write an ordinance. The ordinances are only written by local government, not state. The state can only provide law generally to facilitate the process. What's the limitation of law of a county under township? It's the quantity of county board seats. They directly correlate to how many townships are in the county. So if your county has 20 townships, then there should be 20 people on the county board. It's that simple. Now in section B here, it says, the General Assembly by law shall provide methods available to all counties for the election of county board members. No county may change its method of electing board members except as approved by countywide referendum. Now you'll see there I omitted the other than Cook County so you can understand it better. Any county in Illinois other than Cook can change its method of electing board members except as approved by a countywide referendum. So while Section A says that it's fixed by ordinance, well, then they could say, well, Kendall County made an ordinance. That's what they did at that meeting. But they can't, because they can't do it without a countywide referendum. So here you have the State General Assembly and the County Board of Supervisors both acting unconstitutionally. And so in Part B here, this is different from it says the General Assembly by law shall provide methods available to all the counties for the election of county board members. They've achieved that requirement by having the statute on how a county board of supervisors in a county under township is formed. The General Assembly only has a duty to ensure that each county has a method available to form a county board. This is the different types of counties which we described before. One's under township with a board of supervisors, a commission style, and an executive style. This is one area which the people granted some power to the General Assembly, but what they must do must be in pursuance with the Constitution. So we gave them some power to write statutes on how a commission or executive form was elected, but we also blocked them from messing with how a board of supervisors was elected. Remember how the statute they wrote on the county under township form was made? Simply that the supervisors brought their proof of election to the first meeting. That is the method in which the county board is supposed to be formed. The second sentence of Part B is another prohibition, but it's also a big hint. The General Assembly can't change any method of electing board members unless there's a countywide referendum by the people, which makes perfect sense because the method in which you elect a county board determines what kind of county government or what type of county government you have. If the people want their county to be under their direct control, they choose a county under township form. If they want to hand over some of their power to the General Assembly to centralize it and have them influence the county so they don't have to be involved, then they can have a commission or executive form. Additionally, this keeps proper fundamental principles in a republic. It's only the people that can alter, reform, or abolish their government. That's it. Section C on here, this applies to only Cook County. Cook County lawfully did change form. If you notice on the original stuff that I showed you with when we made county under township form, Cook originally selected or elected to be a county under township form. But with the 1970 Constitution, that changed things. And that's something my opinion is that they should want to go back to so that they can have more direct involvement with their townships in that city and so they don't get overlooked. I think once the people figure out that they're able to have direct control via townships, it's my opinion that they should probably vote to revert back to a county under township form they used to have. And again, there's been a lot of talk on how people want to create a new state and separate from Chicago, but that's super challenging and an ambitious thing to do. It also leaves the people of Chicago high and dry, but there's no need to do those things if each county had their township form back, if they reverted back to what the people's last lawful form was. And by law, that's what has to happen. There doesn't need to be a court case for this. There doesn't need to be a referendum or election for this. And just so I don't forget to say it later on, there can't be because that's going to be one of the things that the response is going to be. Well, we'll just do a referendum now to do that. Well, I got news. You see, the unlawfully created board can't, they're as if they don't exist. They can't even put that referendum onto a ballot. That the only way that can happen is by the people. And if the people would learn these things about townships, I've got a feeling that people aren't going to want to continue the way things have gone. Now, here is one of the only granted authority we gave to the General Assembly concerning townships specifically. In Section 5 of Article 7 of the Illinois 1970, it says, the General Assembly shall provide by law for the formation of townships in any county when approved by countywide referendum. So there it is. They have to create a process for us to do a referendum to form a township. Townships may be consolidated or merged, and one or more townships may be dissolved or divided when approved by referendum in each township affected. All townships in a county may be dissolved when approved by a referendum in the total area in which township officers are elected. Notice how they omitted here a county under township. They don't talk about it because they're hiding it. Now, this is the people's constitution, and this is what we approved. I get that. But we have to understand that it was written by these attorneys that hid things. And just because it's not stated here doesn't mean that's not what exists. We tasked the General Assembly to write a uniform statute for the whole state on how a township would be formed. consolidated, merged, dissolved, divided. But then we also block them from being able to do it themselves. It's always got to be approved by the people. Notice how this ensures that the townships are created by the people and not the General Assembly. This keeps law and order for official processes and how things are done. The General Assembly can't create or dissolve a township. Only the people can. The only thing we granted them authority to do was to make that process uniform throughout the state. That's it. So any new legislation that they're trying to do that would dissolve townships without a referendum can't be done. They simply can't be done. They cannot do away with changing our form of government without approval by the people. Now, sadly, many people are going to clamor to this. There's many people that say, well, yeah, it makes sense. We're duplicating. Let's take the highways, the roads departments. Each township has a highway, roads department, a roads district. But then the county does also. Well, which one came first? The township ones did. And then when they started to begin to centralize stuff, they created the highway department for the county. So yes, there's duplication of services there, but which one's the correct one? The correct one is to have the township highway departments and eliminate the county highway department, or figure out a way to work that stuff together so everything gets done. But the point is that you do have duplication of things, but which one do we want? Do we want the one where it's centralized, pushing things up underneath the state? Or do we want to keep things locally within the reach of the people? I advocate for keeping things in reach of the people and the ability to, whenever we need to, we can call a special meeting and we can take care of business. In section 11 of the local government section of the 1970, it says initiative and referendum. In part A, proposals for actions which are authorized by this article or by law and which require approval by referendum may be initiated and submitted to the electors by resolution of the governing board of a local unit of government or by petition of electors in the manner provided by law. Now we're going to talk about that for a second. It's what I just explained. Proposals for actions which are authorized by this article or by law, which require approval by referendum. So in order to change a township, it has to be done by referendum. It says they may be initiated and submitted by to the electors by resolution of the governing board of a local unit of government. A county is a local unit of government, and so is a township. But can the county board, which has been unlawfully created, initiate a referendum? Fundamentally, according to the maxims of law, the answer is no, because they're void. So if a county board gets wind of what we're talking about here, and they're going to try and rush ahead of the people and do a referendum that in haste that activates, back to that time, to 1971 or whatever the period is that they changed, they can't do it because they unlawfully exist on the onset. So the only way that county could change or do a retroactive referendum would be on petition by the electors. The second thing here is regarding townships. Now, townships were lawfully created. And so a township board could initiate a referendum, but they can't just dissolve without the approval of the people. And then in part B here, it says referenda required by this article shall be held at general elections except as otherwise provided by law. Questions submitted to referendum shall be adopted if approved by a majority of those voting on the question unless a different requirement is specified in this article. And so if you see here, let's go back real quick. In part C, of section 2, it said the county seats shall not be changed unless approved by 3/5 of those voting. So if you're going to want to change county seats, it's got to be by 3/5, not just 50-50. But in other ones, when it just generally says referendum, it's talking about a majority of the people that voted. So this one here is just saying that the referendum has to be at general elections, and that makes a lot of sense because that's when most people vote. So you're going to get the highest voter turnout for that. But this is also saying that once the people have spoken and voted, it's adopted, it's final. Like it's done because that's what the people decided. And if we look at section 12 of the local government, this must be read in light of the other provisions. It's the General Assembly shall provide by law for the transfer of assets, powers, and functions, and for the payment of outstanding debt in connection with the formation, consolidation, merger, division, dissolution, and change in the boundaries of units of local government. A county and a township are units of local government. And so what this one is saying is that once it has to be read in light of the other provisions. So the only way to form, consolidate, merger, divide, or dissolve a township is to do it by referendum. Once that's done, then the General Assembly is tasked with this provision. Then they have to facilitate legislation on how to transfer the assets, the powers, the functions, and the outstanding debt. The General Assembly is handcuffed from getting involved unless there's a referendum. So right now, there's legislation on the table about assessors for the townships, and they're trying to change powers, but do it without a referendum. You can't do it. The General Assembly can't do it. They're unlawfully writing legislation. So now we're going to take a look at some of the quotes from prominent people back in the 1800s when Illinois was first having the discussion of adopting county under township form. Hopefully we built up a foundation throughout this video so you can now see what they were saying a little bit more clearly and why they were saying it. Broadly speaking, this has to do with two different ideals. One ideal is that government should be centralized with like a commission form with state control. The other ideal is that government should be decentralized in a township form where the people can more easily assert their power. Both can be Republican in form, but I think you'll begin to see that the centralization leads to tyranny, bureaucracy, inefficiency, waste, fraud, and abuse, and decentralization or fragmented power leads to efficiency, accountability, and responsiveness, and most importantly, liberty. Now, one more last definition before we go and read some of those quotes. In Black's Law Fourth, it speaks of liberty. The definition of liberty is freedom, exemption from extraneous control, freedom from all restraints except such as are justly imposed by law. Justly imposed by law. The absence of arbitrary restraint, not immunity from reasonable regulations and prohibitions imposed on the interest of the community. The power of the will to follow the dictates of its unrestricted choice and to direct the external acts of the individual without restraint, coercion, or control from other persons. The freedom from governmental interference in exercise of intellect, in formation of opinions, in the expression of them, and in action or inaction dictated by judgment. Freedom in enjoyment and use of all of one's powers, faculties, and property. Freedom of assembly. You see, the township form of government offers and ensures liberty for the people. The townships have to follow according to law, and we can't do things that are prohibited in the Constitution, but we're also free to operate without extraneous control from the state because we only gave them certain areas where they could do things for us. One of those being, for instance, hey, state, which are our servants. So state, we want you to create a statute on how we form. But then we handcuff them by saying they can't do it without referendum. So I hope you can begin to see this. And now we're going to read these older quotes. These are coming from the discussion that was taking place in that time period when Illinois was going to adopt township form of government as an alternative form for each county if they wanted to. So from that early 1800 to mid 1800 era. Daniel Webster, in his Plymouth Address of 1820, used the following language. Great facility has been given to this system of representation in New England by the early division of the county into townships or small districts, in which all concerns of local police are regulated and in which representatives to the legislature are elected. Nothing can exceed the utility of these little bodies. This is speaking of townships. There are so many councils or parliaments in which common interests are discussed and useful knowledge acquired and communicated. In more general terms, but with greater force, he expressed similar views at the Pilgrim Festival in New York City in 1843. It says, circumstances have wrought out for us a state of things which in other times and other regions philosophy has dreamed of, and a theory has proposed, and speculation has suggested, but which man has never been able to accomplish. I mean the government of a great nation over a vastly extended portion of earth by means of local institutions for local purposes and general institutions for general purposes. That's speaking of the general institution being the state general assembly, the local institution being townships. I know of nothing in the history of the world, notwithstanding the great league of the Grecian states, notwithstanding the success of the Roman system, I know nothing more suitable on the whole for the great interests of a great people spread over a large portion of the globe as the provision of a local legislation for local and municipal purposes. With not a confederacy nor a loose binding together of separate parts, but a limited, positive, general government for positive, general purposes over the whole. In Illinois, we're supposed to have a general government for general purposes at a state level, but these local legislative body politics of townships are where we get our freedom, our liberty, and where we govern locally and have a responsive government to local needs, not dictated by Springfield. Dr. Lieber, in his Civil Liberty, says, self-government, to be of a penetrative character, requires the institutional self-government of the country or district. It requires that everything which without general inconvenience can be left to the circle to which it belongs, be thus left to its own management. It consists in the prosecuting grand jury, in the petty jury, in the fact that much of which is called on the European continent, the administrative branch, to be left to the people. It requires, in one word, all the local appliances of government, which are termed local self-government. And Niebuhr says that British liberty depends at least as much on these as Parliament, and in contradistinction to them, he calls the government of the continent Staatsregierungen, or state governments, meaning governments directing all detail by the general and supreme power. So this local self-government, it's called. It's local self-government. And remember, one of the prohibitions was the prosecuting grand jury or petty jury. You see, the local township and the county could do things with a grand jury to even hold state and federal servants accountable for their actions. In the Massachusetts Convention for the forming of a new constitution in 1853, the following gentlemen, in discussing the new basis of representation, gave their testimony incidentally and regarding to their town system. Now understand, in some states in the north and east, they wouldn't call them townships, they would just call them towns, which is different from a city. The Honorable Geo Hillard, the eminent lawyer and author, said, "Without municipal institutions, there is no constitutional liberty. These local, separate, and independent assemblies, through which the lifeblood of the nation flows and circulates, in which matters are discussed important enough to awaken interest, yet not important enough to arouse ambition, are the fountains from which our political prosperity has flowed. May they remain as pure as they have hitherto been. So he's speaking about townships, and there's where we don't have townships, there's no constitutional liberty. They're local, separate, and independent assemblies. You see, when Article 1, Section 1 of the Illinois Constitution says that all men are free and independent, we're independent from government. But when we come together in a township, it's a collection of kings. It's a collection of power. They're independent assemblies that are separate from state oversight, only in the areas that we granted authority to. The Honorable Whiting Griswold said, "There is a strong natural tendency in towns to equality and republicanism and democratic forms of government. All men meet in town meetings upon a level, the rich and the poor, the high and the low, the learned and the ignorant. What a model for government." The same gentleman read an abstract from a letter written by a distinguished son of Virginia, whom he did not feel permitted to name, in which the latter says, "My admiration of your townships is perfectly unabated, since I had the pleasure of seeing you at Pittsfield. They are models after the plan of King Alfred's hundreds, and organized as you have them, are small republics that constitute the main strength. To use Mr. Jefferson, that's Thomas Jefferson, expression of the larger one, I should be sorry to see anything done to break down their organization. I ascribe to their influence much of the prosperity of the Eastern states, and most of their power in the affairs of the Union." See, they're little republics, they're small republics, and they constitute the main strength. That's what townships are. He ascribes their influence to much of the prosperity of the Eastern states. This is the conversation that was taking place about whether a commission form or a township form was better. And so Illinois offers both. But what we have now in Kendall County is that unlawfully taken from us and moved back into basically a commission form where everything's answerable to the state general assembly and the governor. Now, if you theoretically have righteous, moral people that are staying within the bounds of the Constitution, that might work just fine. But what happens when you have people that are operating outside the bounds? Yeah, there's things that you can do, but what better way than to assemble as the people at the local township assembly in a lawful manner to address these things? The Honorable Rufus Cahote, who was in this convention, spoke as follows. The system is this. The inhabitants of the towns, as such, are charged with certain public affairs, by the care of which they become trained to business, instructed, elevated. What are these affairs? Education, pauperism, the care of the public ways, the police of the town, its finances, the election of its officers, the giving of votes for officers to represent the people in government. To administer these affairs, they meet in town meeting. They think and exchange opinions. They discuss and decide. And thus they become accustomed to business, to the formation and expression of thoughts, to know and feel and act out what is meant by public life, as distinct from the selfishness and insulation of mere personal toil for personal gain. Besides all this, they have ever been accustomed occasionally to meet and consider some of to consider of those subjects of extraordinary interest by which the nation or the state is from time to time agitated. As such, meetings have also formed part of the same general discipline. So it's in these little republics, in these townships, that you can deal with even national or state issues. And this is a place where the people come and learn government and discuss it. But these aren't town halls. Like, you have the politicians that do town halls on like the campaign trail. Those have turned into just it's a campaign pitch. But what these are town halls, which are lawful meetings, lawful gatherings, where the people can bring up resolutions, where they can bring up things that are going on, and votes can be taken and lawful action be taken. And it's all completely lawful. The Honorable Benjamin Hallett remarked, and now let me say in conclusion that regarding these little republics of towns as the very elements of our most wholesome, moral, and political institutions, as the altars upon which are annually offered incense to patriotism, which, like devotion, is strengthened by the frequent ritual observance, and from the practice of which, for centuries, by the congregation in town meeting assembled, we have been made such a people as we are. Let us stand here today firmly upon the old principle of corporate representation for the towns. Notice what he's saying here. First, he's calling them little republics of towns as the very elements of our most wholesome moral and political institutions, as the altars upon which annually offered incense to patriotism. He's talking about the annual town meeting. You see, if we want to be a patriot, an American patriot, we don't have to go out and protest and do these things. We don't have to try to do the political gamesmanship. We don't have to work harder for a particular party or donate more money. We need to get active in our local assemblies. And we still do this annual ritual frequent observance. There are annual town meetings. It even calls it a congregation in town meetings assembled. It says, we've been made such a people as we are. Let us stand here today firmly upon the old principle of corporate representation for the towns. What better way to express and assert your rights than to be able to show up with the body politic of the town and assert that authority? The Honorable Chase Upham of Salem said, no one can express stronger sentiments than I entertain of the part of which those towns have played from the beginning in the history of this Commonwealth. They have been indeed pure and real democracies, popular sovereignties, and schools of self-government. Through them, the people of this Commonwealth have been indoctrinated, in a good way, generation after generation, in the great principles of law and liberty, of freedom and order. The organization of the small towns of this Commonwealth has been the instrumentality through which the people have been trained in attachment to the great principle of equality, and have been taught that principle in combination with a respect for the wisdom of years and the lessons of experience. In the small towns, the people of Massachusetts have been made familiar with the general rules that regulate popular assemblies, the leading principles of parliamentary law. And in that way, they have been enabled from the first, with great facility and entire success, to accomplish the difficult work of bringing out a clear and certain expression of the popular will. Now, understand here, he's talking about these being popular sovereignties and schools of self-government. When they say real democracies here, they're not talking about it in the way that it's talked about today. Because a Republican form of government has aspects of a democracy. And let's put that into shoe leather real quick to explain it. We have our constitutions that are made, and they list our Bill of Rights. So I don't care whether it's a township or a county or a commission form or whatever, every individual has the Bill of Rights. No government institution or agency or bureaucracy can go against that Bill of Rights. And when you want your township to do something, if it's an individual invoking their individual rights, like let's say they're getting trespassed by government, you don't need everybody to do something. They just need to be able to bring that concern to the township, and the township should be taking action for that. But where you get into things like a democracy or the rule of 51%, 50 plus 1%, like let's take it to something that's very lawful. Let's say the township wants to, they can lawfully create a park. So you want to create a park for the children to go to. There's nothing unconstitutional about that. And the people decide that they're going to build a park. But then there's a discussion that takes place, should it be on the north side of town or the south side of town? We're just making this up as we go here. That's where a democracy comes into place, where nothing unlawful is being done, but then the town gets together and they vote or they decide on, 50 plus 1% want it to be on the north side of town, so that's where it's going to go. Nobody's rights are violated. Nobody's trespassing government. It's just the general will of the people by a margin of 50 plus 1%. But in a Republican form of government, before that takes place, there's a wall of separation. It's the Bill of Rights. Now, if the town wants to, let's say they want to make an ordinance that the people that want to homeschool their children have to make a declaration and send it to the school district. Well, that directly trespasses the privacy rights of the people of Illinois and the people of the township, and so they can't do that. You see what our General Assembly is doing right now? And I hope you can see how a township could get together at a special meeting and write a remonstrance or a resolution that says and expresses the individual rights of the people, and the township can collectively take a stand and tell the state that they can't impose this law because it's unconstitutional. But you have to know the fundamental principles in order to do that, and you have to get people in your community to come together. And now, instead of, say, me personally having to sue the state and I get to win my case, well, great, I just took care of myself. But what happens to all the other people in the community that didn't do that? Do they still get oppressed? Do they still have tyranny run over them? Or are we going to look out for our neighbors and come together as the people to lawfully do things within our created assemblies in our townships to actually do real resolutions, real things? And you don't have to go to court for this. You don't have to rely on a judge who may or may not understand the fundamental principles of law. You see, this gets to the root of the issue instead of dealing with the symptoms. And if we'll take our time to slow down and get to the root of the issue, then we'll be able to make lasting and effectual change to recur to the fundamental principles of what this state once used to be. The Honorable Marcus Morton said, "The importance of these municipal corporations nobody will question. Nobody has a higher," let me pause there. Understand when they're talking about municipal corporations, they're talking about townships. Just because our current Illinois Constitution defines municipal corporations in a different manner doesn't mean that the two don't correlate. So what he's talking about is our townships. But because they define them differently as a unit of local government in our Constitution, you have to be able to know which words mean what when you're reading them in particular places. So the importance of these municipal corporations, nobody will question. Nobody has a higher opinion of their utility. Nobody attributes more prosperity of the Commonwealth to these municipalities than I do. Nobody has a higher opinion of their use in inculcating and establishing democratic principles. The subject of establishing bylaws and adopting petitions and remonstrances to the state or federal government and the passing of approbatory or denunciatory resolves often come before town meetings and open for discussion the science of government and whole range of politics. In these assemblies are learned the rudiments of legislation and the mode of transacting public business. Here are trained and prepared the future governors, judges, legislators of the Commonwealth. No one appreciates these democratic schools more than I do, or would be more unwilling to destroy or diminish their power and usefulness. Mr. Marcus Morton would be horrified as what's going on in Illinois and what has been taking place. These are utility, he says utility, their utility, nobody attributes more. The prosperity of the Commonwealth. Establishing bylaws, adopting petitions, remonstrance. A remonstrance is a strong rebuke against a measure. Now you can individually do a remonstrance, 100%. But the problem is our government servants have been so trained to not listen to the people that they don't listen to us. But what happens when a township assembly comes together and delivers a township remonstrance to the state or the federal government? What happens when we call them into question about their constitutional or non-constitutional actions? What happens when the people learn the science of government? Because that's what maxims are. Maxims, one place it calls maxims like axioms for geometry. They're fundamental principles. You learn these things by people first learning them individually, but then sharing them and implementing them at the township level. Theodore Parker, in a speech delivered at Boston in May 1858, says, in speaking of American institutions, "We have the foremost form of political institutions, with local self-government as ideal. We take that for the equivalent of freedom." Notice that he equates freedom with local self-government. What is a township? It is local self-government. While centralized government by others we look on as the same with slavery. Do you see the big effect here? Do you see principally the ideals or what's going on? These people began to recognize that even literally with the Civil War, we're talking about the southern states had this centralized form of government, and it led to slavery. But in Illinois, they recognized the prosperity of the northern states that had this township form, and that leads to freedom. Of course, the Illinois government, who wants to be oppressive, is trying to get rid of and has in large part neutered the townships. But why did they go to these great lengths in 1971 to do things so unlawfully and then try to seemingly cover up everything by reorganizing all of the statutes? It's because these are the beacons of liberty, the local self-governing government ideal, the township, the county under township form is the equivalent of freedom, while centralized government we look at on as the same with slavery. Hopefully you can see what is written, what is truth, what is law. Principally, I hope you can see what has been hidden from the people. The township and the county under township form offers the most direct power of the people and is the way to ensure our state governments, from the feds to the state to the local, are all amenable to the people without some complicated process. Simple notices and affidavits are the foundation, and then learn how to lawfully assemble at an official township meeting and then get to business. Hopefully you can see how the government is only granted certain power from the people, and it's the people that have reserved the most power for themselves. The problem is we haven't known how or where to assert that power. Additionally, any power granted can be taken back. It's not given away without restrictions. They say history repeats itself. And if any of you are the type of historian type, you can see this pattern playing out right here. Illinois began very centralized. The people saw what was happening. Things like slavery based on race were taking place in the southern states. They gathered and recognized the righteousness, the freedom, liberties, and prosperity of the northern states following a biblical pattern. And then they took action by lawfully altering our local government and placing prohibitions on the state government to prevent things like slavery, among others. Sometime after 1870, this ideology of centralization crept back in, leading to an unlawful change back to this centralized form, culminating July 1st, 1971. This has led to the slavery of the people, and we don't even realize it. This time, instead of racial slavery, it's a systemic oppression throughout the entire state with a two-party system that was never intended. Interestingly, this is the same pattern that was taking place during the time that Jesus Christ walked the earth. He came shortly after the Roman Republic, a very powerful, decentralized local government that had transitioned into the Roman Empire, which was very centralized and became tyrannical and oppressive. Isn't it interesting that we're living in a time when the same thing is happening and Jesus showed us the way through it? There's some links and more information on some of the topics of law in a very short book available on Amazon called Township Organization for Local or Self-Government for the People. This is where some of these quotes were taken from. This information was too important to delay to get out, so please sign up at teleioshield.com for announcements and information as more content becomes available. There's a lot more to talk about. There's a lot more things to discuss. But the first thing that we have to see is that the people have the ability to gather and take action at their local township assemblies. As this information begins to spread, there'll be politicians and attorneys who will try to justify and explain away what has taken place. And in most cases, they'll simply ignore the people and continue to do what they want. But a simple response to them is, show me where it's written and swear by affidavit. None of them will be willing to do it. Show these things to your local county board. First, research your state, but then show it to them. When you send them notice and affidavit, they're going to do just like what they did with ours. They're going to give it to an attorney. An attorney's going to say, oh, don't worry about that. The problem is the attorney's wrong. The attorneys don't know the fundamental principles. The attorneys haven't studied this stuff, and they're blocking they're blocking the people from being able to enter into the real law. They're hiding the key of knowledge. They'll offer opinions, they'll offer innovations of law, but they won't be able to rebut the truth of what's written. We showed you today what is written. Nobody is able to come up with where a referendum was at for Kendall County. And until someone can show that, then what took place is null and void. You see, the truth really does make you free. Once people begin to assemble lawfully at their township meetings, they'll begin to be able to lawfully and peacefully assert their power. Nearly every aspect of our lives are touched by unlawful government encroachment. There's so much to do to correct it, but it must come from the people. The government will not and cannot correct itself. It's a maxim of law that says the people is the greatest master of error. In other words, it's the people's responsibility to be the masters and correct their servants' errors. We can't demand our public servants repent if we're not willing to invest ourselves into correcting our unlawful government actions and the mistakes of previous generations. In America and Illinois, we're a republic, not a democracy, for good reason. The people really are sovereign and have all the power. The question is, will we lawfully and peacefully do what it takes to invest our time and efforts into learning these principles? Or will we be like previous generations and acquiesce to oppression and tyranny? Our children, grandchildren, and our posterity are hanging in the balance. Their future depends on our response. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. This video and information is simply a presentation of truth by right as one of the people. It's not legal advice. The question remains, will the people continue to insist on fighting against the symptoms of unlawful government, or will they be willing to get involved to correct by laying the axe to the root of the issue? Which I believe is educating the people on the fundamental principles, reclaiming our township form of government, and lawfully assembling. From there, every other issue can be addressed, from homeschooling to solar fields, property taxes, schools, pornography in the libraries, and everything else. This involves so much more than just going to vote during an election. We don't claim to have all the answers for all the issues that arise, but with a solid foundation of biblical knowledge and fundamental principles of law, and knowing the maxims and our constitutions, the answers can be discovered. To God be the glory for revealing these hidden truths and revealing to people things that were stolen from us that we never knew existed. Isaiah 59:4 says, "None calleth for justice, nor any pleadeth for truth. They trust in vanity and speak lies. They conceive mischief and bring forth iniquity." We need to call for justice and truth. Anything else is vanity, it's emptiness, busy work, to keep us from focusing on what is the most important, the root of the issue. So what do we do going forward? First, begin to research your county and see what form of government you're supposed to have. Then begin to assemble and teach people. Share this video with people in your township and community. Learn the fundamental principles of law, the maxims of law. Learn how to write notices and affidavits and call special meetings. A response from government will likely be to cover their tracks as this becomes known. They'll likely just try to do a referendum, retroactive, to correct the error, but they can't. First, the County Board of Supervisors needs to be reformed, and county boards that unlawfully exist need to facilitate this transition back to a lawfully and foundationally created Board of Supervisors. There's so much that has been done by these unlawful bodies that must be corrected. Our little republics or townships can do mighty things to hold other government servants and the state accountable. The people need to resume their rightful place by peacefully and lawfully asserting their power at the township level, which is actually the most powerful position, so that we truly can be the master of error. This will take work and diligence, and since we've already seen how people reject the truth and this knowledge, it's going to take some persistence. If we continue to be lukewarm, we'll slip further away from the truth of the liberties that we're supposed to enjoy. So I hope you'll take this, you'll learn from it, and begin to implement some of these things. To God be the glory for the great things He's done.